In a significant development, the United States has seized a supertanker, the Libertad, which was transporting Venezuelan crude oil intended for China. U.S. naval forces intercepted the vessel in international waters, citing violations of American sanctions against Venezuela's PDVSA. The operation was conducted without resistance from the crew. The tanker is currently under U.S. naval escort and is en route to an American port. This action has drawn attention within global shipping and diplomatic communities. The Libertad was monitored for several days after departing Venezuela. Over 2 million barrels of crude oil are now under U.S. jurisdiction, pending legal proceedings. The interception of a vessel bound for China introduces a new element to international maritime enforcement. Oil prices increased as markets anticipated potential disruptions. Observers are now focused on how China and Venezuela will address this situation. The U.S. government described the operation as a lawful measure intended to prevent the Maduro administration from benefiting from oil sales that violate U.S. sanctions. The Department of Justice characterized the seizure as a law enforcement action under existing sanctions and anti-money laundering laws. China responded by criticizing the action, describing it as inconsistent with international law. President Xi communicated concerns directly to President Trump, requesting the release of the vessel. Chinese officials emphasized their position on the right to trade with Venezuela and stated their intention to safeguard national interests. The Venezuelan government, led by President Maduro, described the seizure as an act of economic pressure. Caracas accused the U.S. of taking Venezuelan resources and indicated plans to address the matter at the United Nations. Official statements from each side highlight differing perspectives. The U.S. references domestic law, while China and Venezuela cite sovereignty and trade rights. Both parties appear committed to their positions, suggesting the possibility of an extended diplomatic and legal process. The situation is now a significant point of discussion in U.S.-China relations. Observers are monitoring developments for potential global impacts. The United States justifies the seizure through a series of executive orders and federal statutes that specifically target Venezuela's PDVSA. These sanctions prohibit U.S. entities from conducting business with PDVSA, and the U.S. maintains that this restriction applies to any transaction involving its financial system. The Department of Justice states that the China-bound oil sale involved such transactions, which brings it under U.S. jurisdiction. As a result, the oil is now classified as a forfeitable asset, and a federal court has authorized its seizure. This process shifts the issue from a foreign policy matter to a domestic law enforcement action, utilizing extraterritorial jurisdiction. The intended outcome is to increase economic pressure on the Maduro government in an effort to encourage political change. Targeting a tanker bound for China communicates the U.S. position to Beijing and other countries that support Venezuela. The United States is prepared to accept diplomatic consequences in order to enforce its sanctions. This action is part of a broader strategy that uses economic measures, including secondary sanctions, to pursue foreign policy objectives. The seizure of the Libertad illustrates this approach in practice. It represents a move from financial restrictions to direct intervention. The U.S. government's position is that sanctions will be enforced, even in complex international contexts. The situation reflects the significant implications of these policies. The recent seizure has prompted discussion among maritime law experts. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, protects freedom of navigation. The United States acknowledges this principle, although it has not ratified the treaty. Some analysts note that intercepting a commercial vessel in international waters without a United Nations mandate may be inconsistent with this principle. International law generally allows exceptions for piracy, slave trading, or stateless ships. This situation does not appear to fall under those categories. China and Venezuela have described the U.S. action as piracy, but most legal interpretations do not support this view. The main issue centers on the United States applying its domestic laws to foreign vessels in international waters. This approach may lead to responses from other nations and could affect established maritime practices. As a result, there is ongoing discussion about the future of international maritime norms. The recent tanker seizure is closely connected to the ongoing U.S.-China strategic competition, where energy security plays a significant role. China, as the world's largest oil importer, depends on maritime routes that are largely overseen by the U.S. Navy. The interception of the Libertad highlights China's ongoing concerns about the security of its energy supply routes, often referred to as the Malacca Dilemma. The United States, now a net energy exporter, has increased flexibility and can influence global markets with relatively lower risk to its own energy needs. By seizing the tanker, the U.S. demonstrates its capacity to affect key maritime energy routes. For China, this event serves as a practical example of the potential challenges it could face if its energy supplies were disrupted. Control over shipping lanes remains an important factor in international strategic relations. The broader competition involves not only oil, but also influence, technology, and the management of global trade routes. By focusing on Venezuela's oil trade with China, the U.S. is addressing both regional and global strategic interests. This action connects developments in the Western Hemisphere to the broader dynamics of the Indo-Pacific region. As a result, regional issues are increasingly linked to global strategic considerations. To address maritime vulnerabilities, China has invested in developing alternative energy routes over several years. The Belt and Road Initiative features pipelines from Russia, Kazakhstan, and Myanmar, providing options that avoid contested sea lanes. Projects such as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and the Gwadar Port are designed to facilitate direct oil transport into Western China, reducing reliance on maritime routes. Recent events are likely to encourage Beijing to continue prioritizing the completion of these infrastructure projects. Additionally, China is increasing investment in renewable energy and nuclear power to diversify its energy sources. The country's strategic petroleum reserve is intended to provide a buffer against potential supply interruptions. The recent seizure highlights the importance of energy security and reinforces China's efforts toward greater self-sufficiency. As a result, there may be increased investment in overland routes and further development of naval capabilities to support energy transport. In Beijing, there is a growing recognition of the need to reduce reliance on international systems managed by other major powers. As a result, energy security has become a central focus of national policy. The seizure has an immediate effect on global trade operations. Shipping and insurance costs for sanctioned cargo are increasing. Ship owners are now considering the possibility of vessel loss due to enforcement actions at sea. This situation may discourage companies from trading with sanctioned nations, even if such trade is permitted domestically. These developments could lead to changes in global trade patterns, with countries exploring alternative routes and financial systems. The established trading framework is experiencing increased pressure. If freedom of navigation is perceived as conditional, similar actions by other nations may become more common, affecting maritime interactions. The principles that have supported open maritime commerce may be subject to change. The international community now faces a choice: to reaffirm established maritime law or to adapt to a more fragmented and less predictable trading environment. The Libertad's seizure serves as a significant point of evaluation for the current global system. Each nation must consider the relationship between unilateral sanctions and the broader principles of free trade. As of December 23, 2025, the Libertad remains under U.S. Navy control and is en route to an American port. The United States maintains that the seizure is a lawful enforcement of existing sanctions. China and Venezuela have formally requested the vessel's release and indicate they will pursue available diplomatic and legal channels. Chinese officials have issued strong statements, but their specific response is not yet determined. Most U.S. allies have not made public statements and are monitoring the situation. The event highlights ongoing debates regarding international law, sovereignty, and maritime rights. The issue extends beyond oil, raising questions about the future framework for global trade and international relations. Current attention is on diplomatic discussions and the potential for further developments. Legal proceedings may continue for an extended period, establishing new precedents. The international community is observing the situation to assess its broader implications.